Hello, everybody. It's True Lifestyles coming to you today with an exclusive with a former UnitedHealthcare executive who was nice enough to sit down with me today and answer some questions about this unfortunate murder of Brian Thompson, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, who was gunned down in New York City. And today we're going to talk about the unfortunate situation and climate of healthcare in the United States today, and the strange popularity of Luigi Mangione. And we're going to dive into some really controversial topics. So I just wanted to welcome my guests today. How are you doing?
Okay.
Wonderful. And can you tell us a little bit more about when you worked at UnitedHealthcare? I understand if you're not comfortable telling us when, but tell us about your title.
I was a national medical director for most of my years at United Health Group. I was there for about 10 years. I left in 2005 and did not know Brian Thompson. We worked in different parts of a huge company. But I was, again, a national medical director for 9 years with the Optum division, which was small at the time, but has now grown to be a huge part of United Health Group, and generally is the services part of the company, which is separate from United Healthcare, which is the health insurance arm, the health plan arm of United Health Group.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that there was two separate companies. Does United Health Group still exist?
Yes, that's the umbrella over many, many acquisitions. It's an enormous company with dozens and dozens of acquisitions, but its two biggest components are, again, United Healthcare, the health insurance plan component, and the Optum component, which are a variety of tech and clinical and other services. And I was in the Optum part of the company.
And that portion of United Healthcare, United Health Group still exists today?
They both still exist, right? And again, the overall umbrella, overall that is United Health Group. There's a CEO of United Health Group, and then there's a CEO. Brian Thompson was that for the United Healthcare health plan component.
What was the public's view of United Healthcare, United Health Group in the early 2000s?
Well, it was always somewhat controversial because it involved a big reorganization and the emergence of nonprofit health plans called health maintenance organizations in the early days, and for-profit. And United Health Group was involved with both. In the state of Minnesota, health plans have to be nonprofit, such as Blue Cross Blue Shield generally is a nonprofit type of company. Kaiser Permanente is a nonprofit. But United Health Group led the way to having a lot of for-profit components, including most of the United Healthcare plans. And that involved capitalism, for-profit activities that maximize profit, and as a publicly traded company, meeting shareholder expectations, continuous growth, and profitability.
Can you explain to us the difference between nonprofit and for-profit, and when people are choosing their plans, what would lead them to choose a for-profit company?
Right. For-profit, again, is not a charitable organization. It is a for-profit capitalistic business and can be privately held or publicly traded with shares. United Health Group is publicly traded and has many, many shareholders. And the main motive is profit, as well as delivering and providing quality health insurance and health services. Nonprofits, again, biggest example would be Blue Cross Blue Shield plans across the country. Many of those are nonprofit. Some have become for-profit. And again, then represent the interest of shareholders rather than the general public and the board.
Do a lot of corporations use UnitedHealthcare for their employees?
Yes, indeed. There are different markets. And the employer market is called the commercial market, and then there's the government market. Medicaid is generally run by the states, government, federal and state. Health insurance for usually low income, high risk populations. So lots of different approaches out there depending on the state and the situation with like Blue Cross. There's been a tendency for those to go for profit. Again, hospitals are often nonprofit organizations in their state registration, but even that's been changing, and there's been privatization and turning into for-profit in the hospital sector, like Columbia HCA and other for-profit hospital chains. And those are controversial too, because again, they represent the interest of shareholders and making a profit, sometimes above the mission.
So speaking of these profits, and thank you for explaining that, I think a lot of us don't understand why some people might choose a more expensive health care plan. Maybe their job is offering that and they don't know about their different options. So it's very interesting, all the options out there. So back in the day when you worked at United Healthcare, United Health Group, did executives have security?
No, there was controversy, but it had not become violent. That's the very unfortunate situation we have here. It's one thing to have controversy and big difference of opinion. It's another to make that violent. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be nonviolent protest, demonstration, whatever. But coming to violence and murder is totally a tragedy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people agree. Unfortunately, there are some people who don't agree. And what role do you think social media has played in the 21st century with this and violence?
A huge role. It affects everything from birth to death and can magnify minority opinions, fringe opinions, and make them much bigger than they actually are, and can lead to things like violence and suicide and all kinds of adverse outcomes. So it has to be closely monitored by families, by parents, by every sector, and it may indeed need more regulation by the government.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with that. And it seems as though you feel that the healthcare industry can improve. And it sounds like you've worked in the government sector and private in healthcare. Can you explain to us your thoughts and how you feel it can improve?
Sure. Well, roughly half my career has been in the government public health sector, federal, state, and local. So I've seen the government, and it can be very beneficial. It occasionally is slow and sometimes bureaucratic because it has to follow the decisions of Congress, the presidency, state legislatures, local county and city councils, and so forth. But healthcare is so important. It's a huge part of our economy. It's probably top three as far as size of the business sector. It does need to be regulated, and I favor personally a public utility kind of model, a more nonprofit kind of model. There will always be subcontractors who are for profit, but at the top, I think often the nonprofits lead the way on quality and making the right decisions.
It's good and it can benefit a lot of people. It's definitely an ongoing conversation.
Well,
Yeah.
there are nonprofit health plans out there, such as the Blue Cross Blue Shield type plans, and there are nonprofit hospitals out there, and then there are for-profit hospitals. So I think consumers should pay attention to that to those factors when they make their decisions about health plan coverage and so forth.
That's really good advice. I think people definitely need to hear that. Looking at Luigi Mangione and his obvious downward spiral, his mother had gone to the police and put out a missing persons report, and he obviously was struggling with mental health issues. What factors do you think could lead to the downfall of such like a prominent family, their son deciding to take matters into his own hand and do this? What do you think? What kind of factors do you think led up to this?
Well, it's tragic, but it does happen. And some factors that need to be considered, ruled out, would be mental illness, including there are the relatively more minor mental illnesses, people under stress, can be manic depression, bipolar disorders, and then you can get into the serious mental illness, chronic mental illness like schizophrenia. And that could be going on here. He'll have to be evaluated by psychiatrists to look at those factors. And then there's always a concern, it might be substance abuse, addiction, changing behavior. Then you have, including alcohol abuse. Many crimes are committed under the influence of alcohol and behaviors that ordinarily this person wouldn't be exhibiting. And then there can be aggravating factors like difficulty in a life situation, and maybe he had trouble with his health insurance and the care he was receiving for back pain. I've read that was a factor in his case. It should never lead to violence, of course. He was not a UnitedHealthcare client, apparently. I don't know what health plan he had. He was close to the age of 26 when you lose your coverage under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and he may have had to find a new health plan. He may have been having trouble. He may have become very angry. He probably had an anger management problem.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of these things too. I've heard he was working for a car company that no longer exists anymore. The company went under. I agree. I think that age 26, being kicked off of his parents' plan, having to look for healthcare plans that are very expensive to a youngster, mid 20s, is very difficult. I remember when I needed to do that myself, and it's a very daunting situation, especially if your job doesn't offer healthcare. It's very daunting, and I believe that's true. There was no indication that Luigi Mangione was a client of UnitedHealthcare, so or any of his family members, and so it's very bizarre. And on top of that, his new lawyer, I believe she was quoted on a panel before he decided to take her on as his lawyer. She said on a panel that she thought he could plead insanity, which is definitely a difficult a defense to use. So this is going to be an uphill battle. It's seeming like a premeditated murder and just very tragic and unfortunate. And my question for you is, do you think that the healthcare system could benefit from tracking mental illness? It seems as though he had no signs.
Yeah, we have a mental health care problem in this country. There are a lack of providers and clinicians, a lack of good programs to deal with a growing frequency of mental illness. Another factor I would mention is this was a suspected gun crime, and we have way too many guns in our society and way too much gun violence, and where anger management spins out of control and a gun injures or kills someone. So there's that factor.
This is definitely opening up people's eyes to another level of, a shooter who who was the valedictorian of his high school at the Gilman School, which is $37,000 a year tuition, and a person who went to an Ivy League school. This is probably the most shocking gunman that we've seen in quite a while. And as far as the public's reaction to him, I think it's very bizarre. How does that strike you?
Well, it's very disturbing when this kind of situation is picked up by people who make the subject a hero and an icon when the behavior was terrible. This is something where someone needed help and not support for what was going on. So I'm very concerned, disturbed about that, although it has happened before and should be deplored.
Do you think that if Luigi Mangione knew about Obamacare or the steps that the U.S. has taken to make healthcare better and to make it more affordable for people, do you think that the public is misled and uneducated about the healthcare system and their options?
Yes, Obamacare passed around a long time ago, around 2010, and there had been constant efforts to repeal Obamacare, and fortunately it didn't happen, and it's still going and doing a lot of good. Healthcare should be a right. Health insurance should be a right. We ought to cover everyone. I am okay with Medicare for all. The government oversees Medicare and contracts extensively with private sector to deliver it and provide the health insurance, including UnitedHealthcare is a huge health plan under Medicare for seniors. So there are lots of ways it has been improving, and we have still a long way to go. Our results, our outcomes in the United States are near last among developed countries, and it's mainly because we don't cover everyone and we don't have enough equity and equality in our healthcare delivery system. Our life expectancy, our infant mortality results are near the bottom of the list of developed countries. Our price is the highest in the world by a long shot, and things are way too expensive in healthcare, and we need cost reduction badly.
I've heard that UnitedHealthcare doesn't cover a lot of medications, and a lot of people are upset about that and how expensive they are. Life-saving medications are being turned down. So I agree. It could probably improve. Do you think that the healthcare system has improved over the past few decades?
In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. We are covering more people than we used to, thanks to Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. But our results are not getting better, and a big reason is we don't provide enough primary care and preventive services early and often to prevent people from having to go to the emergency room or the hospital. And there are types of cancer, types of infectious diseases that can be prevented and avoided with good primary care and prevention.
And you had said that you worked at Optum, and was that sort of a mission for you guys to help people to get healthier?
Yes, the program I was national medical director for 9 years included a nurse line with nurse telephone advice and nurse care coordination and employee assistance, internet health information. Again, trying to provide those primary care and preventive services virtually. And it was very popular. And when I left, it was covering more than 20 million Americans. It was the largest business unit, and that was part of Optum. But there was also the Optum Care Coordination Unit that dealt with the tough decisions of approving or denying care decisions and so forth. And they tried to use science, they tried to use the up-to-date guidelines, but they also had to be pretty firm, and that's where some of the conflict came when services are denied, often an argument over experimental measures that had not been accepted yet as part of standard practice. And there are guidelines, and United, as far as I know, has been using them all along. It's just a question of how strictly they're enforced.
And who is your target consumer? How would you describe the basic client of United Healthcare?
Well, there are these markets. The commercial market would be employees, and those would be people of working age, sort of up until retirement. Then there's the Medicare market with people who turn 65 and are eligible for Medicare and beyond. So that's a senior kind of health plan. And then there's Medicaid for low-income people. And so those are some of the biggest categories, types of patients in health insurance that Optum and United dealt with.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that it was Medicare and Medicaid that used United Healthcare. Very interesting.
Yes, they're in both those markets. Nearly all health plans are in the Medicare market. Not all are in the Medicaid market because margins and profits are limited more in Medicaid.
Oh, that's very interesting. Wow, thank you so much for explaining these very complex systems to us. And it sounds like the public needs more education. It sounds like a lot of people are frustrated if their parents are on Medicare and they're not getting medicine, or the medicine's expensive, and we think that after we turn 65 everything's going to be free, and long-term care especially. And then my mind goes to that his Luigi Mangione's parents actually owned a healthcare assisted living center in Baltimore, and quite a wealthy family off of that. So it's kind of hypocritical that, but I mean, in that too, he probably had grown up a lot and knowledgeable about the healthcare industry and seeing it, which just makes all of this much more heartbreaking. And there was one more thing I wanted to ask you about. As far as the CEO's salaries go of United Healthcare, I'm sure, and United Health Group, I'm sure back in the past couple of decades, I'm sure it's changed because of the economy, but was the amount that the CEOs was making, did you have any knowledge about it, or was it something that you felt like was a crazy number?
Well, I was there for 10 years, and so I was a stockholder. I get the annual report. There are the salaries of the top executives, and they were enormous. And really sort of out of control. And so it's one of the biggest challenges of for-profit. And even in the nonprofit sector, the nonprofit health plans and the nonprofit hospitals, their salaries are up there also, maybe not quite as high as in the for-profit sector, but that's just a fact of life in capitalism, and it doesn't make it right. And shareholders, I think, ought to insist on more reasonable executive pay, but it's a stretch to make that happen.
Would you be able to tell us a ballpark number of an average?
I can't remember, but the CEO of United Health Group, he was a doctor, had a very high salary and tens of millions of dollars. Way up there with United is one of the biggest companies in the world, and in the U.S. And so the CEO is going to want to be paid as much as the other CEOs are paid.
Wow, $10 million, and that was decades ago.
Well, at least.
Wow. So, and do you think that UnitedHealthcare is going to invest in security, or other corporations will invest in security for their CEOs?
I think it's already happening.
Yeah.
Which is very unfortunate.
Wow. And I think for government as well, unfortunately, there's a lot of ways that the world has changed, and hopefully they can learn to make things safer, or make the government and healthcare listen to people and make it more user friendly and beneficial to all.
Right, and an example of even government needing more security, Dr. Tony Fauci, who I used to work with in federal government, is retired from the government, but still has to have a bodyguard.
Oh, wow.
Government provided.
And everyone in the healthcare industry is just trying to help people, at the end of the day. And unfortunately, I think sometimes greed obviously has gotten into some people's heads of an unequal distribution of wealth, even within these corporations. And obviously, Brian Thompson, he worked his way up from being a entry level, I've heard. Is that true?
Right. I think he joined United in 2004.
Wow. Well, it's a tragic story. I'm sure that this will be an interesting case to follow. Hopefully, social media has cracked down and banned certain people from TikTok for glorifying him, and I think that's good. I think it can only be good. People's livelihoods on TikTok or Instagram being threatened by making frivolous remarks and inciting hate. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and feelings. Very brave, and we'll have to check in as this trial progresses and this case goes on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for liking and watching and subscribing. More videos to come.